The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead in the underground command center, casting harsh shadows across rows of computer terminals. Major Olivia Mercer sat alone at her monitoring station, the blue glow of her screen reflecting off her glasses, as she adjusted the parameters of her detection algorithm. Unlike the bustling activity around other stations, the space around Olivia remained conspicuously empty. Nobody stopped by to chat. Nobody asked about her weekend. Her isolation was as much a part of her daily routine as the cup of black coffee cooling beside her keyboard. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Strategic Missile Detection Center was buried beneath Wyoming's rugged landscape, a Cold War relic that had found new purpose in an era of unpredictable global tensions. Olivia's station looked identical to the other's same gray desk. Same standardized equipment, but her approach to the job set her apart in ways that had earned her sidelong glances and whispered comments. Her notebook sat open beside her keyboard, its edges worn smooth from constant handling. Where others relied exclusively on the automated detection systems, Olivia kept meticulous handwritten records of system anomalies, pattern deviations, and signal variances that fell below official reporting thresholds. The pages were filled with precise notations, timestamps, and calculations that formed a parallel record to the official digital logs. Still documenting phantom missiles, Mercer? The voice came from Lieutenant Colonel Davidson as he passed behind her chair, not bothering to lower his tone. The system's been upgraded 3 times since you started your little diary project. Olivia didn't turn around. The anomalies persist across upgrades, sir. The pattern recognition algorithms still have blind spots when it comes to low signature launches. Her voice remained professional, neither defensive nor confrontational. She'd had this conversation too many times to waste energy on emotion. Davidson stopped, leaning against the neighboring empty desk. The system was designed by the finest minds at MIT and Caltech. It cost $4 billion to implement. But sure, your notebook probably catches all the things they missed. A few chuckles rose from nearby stations. Olivia continued adjusting her parameters, her fingers moving steadily across the keyboard. She had learned long ago that engaging with the mockery only encouraged it. Davidson shook his head and moved on, satisfied with the small audience his comments had gathered. Olivia returned to her work, adding a notation about a minor signal fluctuation in quadrant 7. The fluctuation was too small to trigger any official alerts, but it matched a pattern she had been tracking for weeks: brief energy spikes from an area where no registered testing was scheduled. At the central command table, Colonel Matthews was conducting the morning briefing. His voice carried across the room as he outlined the day's monitoring priorities. Satellite coverage shows normal activity at all primary observation sites. System status is green across all detection arrays. Standard protocol remains in effect. The officers around him nodded, their attention focused on the large display screens showing real-time surveillance data from around the globe. None of them glanced toward Olivia's station, where her secondary monitor displayed a different view, a time-lapse compilation of those barely perceptible energy spikes she had been logging. When the briefing concluded, the room settled into its normal rhythm. Officers moved between stations, comparing notes and running system checks. Conversation flowed easily among them, punctuated by occasional laughter or the hiss of opening soda cans. Olivia remained at her post, isolated by both physical space and professional reputation. Captain Lava Reeves approached, coffee mug in hand. Unlike most of her colleagues, Reeves occasionally made efforts to bridge the gap between Olivia and the rest of the team. "Anything interesting in the diary today?" she asked, her tone friendlier than most, but still carrying a hint of indulgence. 3 low-level energy signatures from the Kamchatka region over the past week, Olivia replied, pulling up the data points on her screen. They fall below reporting thresholds individually, but the pattern is consistent with pre-launch testing procedures. Reeves studied the screen, her expression skeptical. Those could be anything, Mercer. Solar interference, equipment calibration, even atmospheric anomalies. The system filters them out for a reason. The timing is too regular for natural phenomena, Olivia said, pointing to her documented timestamps. And the energy signature has specific characteristics that match known test protocols, just at lower intensity levels. So what are you suggesting? That someone's conducting secret missile tests designed specifically to fly under our radar? Reeves took a sip of her coffee, eyebrows raised. I'm not suggesting anything definitive. I'm documenting anomalies that warrant further investigation. Reeves set her mug down with a sigh. Look, Mercer, you're one of the most thorough analysts we have. Nobody questions your dedication, but you see patterns where there's just random noise. Remember the Baltic anomaly last year? You had half. The command center convinced we were looking at some new stealth technology, and it turned out to be a faulty sensor relay. The memory stung, though Olivia kept her expression neutral. The Baltic incident had reinforced her reputation as someone who chased ghosts in the data. What Reeves and others didn't know, what wasn't included in the official report, was that the sensor relay had been replaced because of Olivia's persistent documentation, revealing a vulnerability that might otherwise have gone undetected for months. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I remember, Olivia said simply. The system is better for having identified and fixed that weakness. Reeves shook her head slightly. Just try to work within the established parameters, okay? We have protocols for a reason. She returned to her station, leaving Olivia alone with her data and her notebook. The morning progressed with the steady rhythm of a facility that operated continuously, in shifts that blended into one another without clear boundaries. Olivia completed her primary duties with the same precision she brought to her personal observations, running system diagnostics, monitoring global launch sites, tracking satellite movements across designated sectors. During her break, she sat alone in the facility's small cafeteria, reviewing her notes while others gathered at tables across the room. Their conversation drifted toward her in fragments: weekend plans, complaints about schedules, jokes about commanding officers, normal human connections that remained largely beyond her reach. Major Gregory Wells slid his tray onto the table across from her, his unexpected presence causing her to look up from her notebook. Wells was new to the facility, transferred from the Pacific Command just 3 weeks earlier. He hadn't been around long enough to fully absorb the collective attitude toward Olivia. Mind if I join you? He asked, though he was already seated. Olivia closed her notebook. Not at all. Wells nodded toward the book. Davidson calls that your conspiracy diary. Says you've been keeping it for years. 3 years, 4 months, she confirmed, neither defensive nor apologetic. I track anomalies and patterns that fall below official reporting thresholds, and you've never found anything significant? His tone was curious rather than mocking. Olivia considered her response carefully. I've identified 7 system vulnerabilities that were subsequently addressed through software updates. I've documented 14 instances of equipment malfunction before they triggered automated alerts. And I've tracked pattern developments that provided additional context for official analyses. Wells took a bite of his sandwich, chewing thoughtfully. So why the reputation? Why Mercer the Paranoid? She hadn't heard that particular nickname before, but it didn't surprise her. Because I also track anomalies that can't be immediately explained or categorized. Most of them eventually prove to be nothing significant, but I document them anyway. In a detection center, false positives are treated as failures of judgment, even though a false negative could be catastrophic. Wells observed. Exactly. For the first time that day, Olivia felt a small connection with a colleague. Someone who understood the fundamental asymmetry of their work, that the consequences of missing something real were infinitely worse than the embarrassment of flagging something benign. "What are you tracking now?" he asked, lowering his voice. Slightly. Olivia hesitated, years of dismissal making her cautious. But something in Wells' genuine interest made her decide to share. She opened her notebook to the most recent page. Energy signatures from the Kamchatka Peninsula. Too small to trigger alerts, but showing a consistent pattern over the past 17 days. The intervals suggest deliberate testing rather than random equipment function or natural phenomena. Wells studied her notations. His background in Pacific Command gave him familiarity with the region that most of their colleagues lacked. These timestamps, they don't align with any scheduled Russian tests or exercises. No, they don't, Olivia confirmed. And the signatures themselves are unusual lower intensity than standard tests, but with specific characteristics that match known launch procedures. Like someone's deliberately keeping them just below our detection thresholds, Wells murmured, more to himself than to her. Before Olivia could respond, Lieutenant Colonel Davidson appeared at their table, his presence casting a shadow across her notebook. "Making a convert, Mercer. Better be careful, Wells. Start taking her seriously, and next thing you know, you'll be jumping at shadows too." Wells straightened in his seat. "Just getting to know my colleagues, sir." Davidson's smile didn't reach. His eyes, "Good. Just remember we deal in verified data here, not hunches and conspiracy theories." He moved on to another table, where he was greeted with easy laughter and casual salutes. Wells watched him go, then turned back to Olivia with a thoughtful expression. "How long have you been tracking the Kamchatka anomalies?" 17 days. She repeated. "The first one appeared on April 3rd, just after the satellite realignment. Initially, I thought it might be calibration error, but the pattern has persisted across multiple systems." "And you've reported it through official channels?" "I submitted an initial query on day 5 when the pattern first became apparent. It was dismissed as insufficient evidence to warrant resource allocation. I've continued documenting since then, building a more comprehensive case." Wells nodded slowly. "I'd like to see your complete data set, if you're willing to share." Pacific Command has different baseline parameters for that region. Might give some useful context. For the first time in months, Olivia felt the weight of isolation lift slightly. "I'll transfer the files to your secure drive this afternoon." When they returned to the command center, Olivia felt the familiar weight of eyes tracking her movement, the subtle shift in conversation as she passed. She had grown accustomed to it, this careful distance that others maintained, as if her attention to detail might somehow be contagious. At her station, she continued her regular monitoring duties while running additional analyses on the Kamchatka. Data. The pattern remained consistent low-level energy signatures, carefully calibrated to fall just below automated detection thresholds, occurring at intervals that suggested systematic testing rather than random events. She was so focused on her work that she didn't immediately notice Colonel Matthews approaching her station. His presence at her desk was unusual enough to cause a ripple of attention across the command center. "Major Mercer," he said, his voice neutral but carrying the natural authority of his rank. "Lieutenant Colonel Davidson informs me that you're still pursuing your theory about anomalous activity in the Kamchatka region." Olivia turned to face him directly. "Yes, sir, I've been tracking a pattern of energy signatures that suggest deliberate testing activities outside of declared exercises." Matthew's expression remained impassive. "You submitted a report on this 2 weeks ago. It was reviewed and determined to be inconclusive. The pattern has continued to develop since then, sir. I now have 17 distinct events that share specific characteristics consistent with pre-launch testing procedures." The colonel glanced at her notebook, then at her secondary monitor where the data points were displayed in sequence. Major, we have limited resources and numerous verified threats to monitor. The system has specific thresholds for a reason. If we investigated every minor fluctuation or anomaly, we'd never accomplish our primary mission. I understand that, sir, but these particular anomalies have been noted, Matthews interrupted. Your diligence is acknowledged, Major, but unless these signatures cross established thresholds, they remain in the category of background noise. His tone made it clear that the conversation was over. Focus on your assigned monitoring sectors. That's an order. Yes, sir, Olivia responded, her posture perfect military precision. As Matthews walked away, the weight of eyes upon her returned, heavier than before. The public dressing down, however professionally delivered, had reinforced her isolation. Across the room, Davidson caught her eye and gave a small, satisfied nod before turning back to his console. Olivia returned to her primary duties, the sting of dismissal familiar but no less sharp for its repetition. She had faced this reaction throughout her career, her attention to detail interpreted as obsession, her persistence seen as inability to accept established wisdom, her caution labeled as paranoia. The rest of her shift passed in focused silence. She completed her required monitoring tasks with characteristic thoroughness, filed her official reports according to protocol, and continued her parallel documentation of the Kamchatka anomalies. When the shift change approached, she prepared her station for her replacement, organizing her notes and securing her personal records. As she was gathering her things to leave, Major Wells approached, keeping his voice low. I've reviewed your data. The pattern is more defined than I initially thought. Olivia nodded, conscious of nearby ears. The latest occurrence was 14 hours ago. Same signature, same energy profile. I've cross-referenced with some old Pacific Command parameters, Wells continued. There are similarities to a testing protocol we observed 2 years ago, but at reduced intensity levels. Which testing protocol? Olivia asked, her interest immediately engaged. Not here, Wells cautioned, glancing around. I've sent some files to your secure mailbox. Review them before your next shift. Olivia understood his caution. In a facility where her professional judgment was routinely questioned, having a conversation that might further mark her as paranoid would only damage Wells by association. I'll look at them tonight, she promised. The walk to her quarters took her through the facility's maze-like corridors, past security checkpoints and reinforced doors that separated the command center from the residential areas. The underground complex was designed for extended operations, with living spaces that provided basic comforts for personnel during their rotation cycles. Olivia's quarters were small but private, a benefit of her rank, despite her controversial reputation. The space was meticulously organized, with books arranged by subject, clothes precisely folded, and personal items minimized to essentials. The habits that made her effective at her job extended naturally into her private life. She set her notebook on the small desk and opened her secure terminal, accessing the files Wells had sent. What she found sent a chill through her professional composure. The testing protocol Wells had referenced was associated with a specific class of medium-range ballistic missiles designed for low-altitude deployment, weapons specifically engineered to evade traditional detection methods. The energy signature she had been tracking matched a scaled-down version of the launch preparation sequence, consistent with miniaturized warheads being readied for deployment. If her analysis was correct, someone was systematically testing a weapons system designed to fly beneath the radar of international monitoring agencies, direct violation of numerous treaties, and a significant threat to global security. Olivia spent the next 3 hours reviewing the data, cross-referencing her observations with historical patterns, and running probability analyses on alternative explanations. Each verification step strengthened her conclusion. The anomalies represented deliberate, covert testing of a weapons system designed for stealth deployment. The evidence was compelling but still circumstantial energy signatures and pattern recognition, rather than concrete visual confirmation. In the hierarchy of military intelligence, such analysis fell far below satellite imagery or communications. Intercepts. Her findings would be classified as speculative without additional verification. She composed a detailed report, incorporating Wells' historical data and her own comprehensive documentation. The analysis was thorough, professional, and built entirely on verifiable data points rather than conjecture. She submitted it through the official channels, knowing it would reach Colonel Matthews' desk by morning. Then she sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the concrete wall of her quarters, and confronted the possibility that she was seeing patterns where none existed. The thought had haunted her throughout her career that perhaps her colleagues were right, that her meticulous attention to detail had crossed the line into obsession, that she was indeed chasing ghosts in the data. But the numbers didn't lie. The patterns she had documented showed a consistency that defied random explanation. The correlation with known testing protocols was too precise to dismiss as coincidence. Whatever reputation she had acquired, whatever isolation she endured, she could not ignore what the evidence was telling her. Olivia returned to her desk and opened her notebook, adding additional notations about the historical comparison Wells had provided. Her handwriting remained precise and clear, each entry dated and time-stamped with military accuracy. If her analysis proved correct, this record would become part of a larger investigation. If she was wrong, it would be further evidence of her tendency to see threats in normal variations. The weight of that uncertainty pressed against her as she prepared for sleep. In the quiet darkness of her quarters, she could admit what she never acknowledged in the command center, that the years of dismissal and isolation had taken their toll, that each rejection of her concerns left small wounds in her professional confidence. But beneath that doubt lay a deeper certainty, a conviction born from years of pattern recognition and data analysis. Something was happening in Kamchatka, something deliberately designed to evade detection, something that carried potentially catastrophic implications. Whether anyone believed her or not, she would continue to track it, document it, and push for investigation. As sleep finally claimed her, Olivia's last conscious thought was of her notebook, filled with observations that might prove meaningless or might someday save lives. Either way, she would keep watching, keep recording, keep trusting that the patterns she saw were real and significant. In a world where missing a single signal could mean disaster, vigilance was never paranoia, it was the only rational response. Morning arrived with the artificial regularity of underground living lights gradually brightening to simulate dawn, ventilation systems adjusting to daytime settings, the distant sounds of shift changes and facility operations replacing nighttime. Quiet, Olivia rose with practiced efficiency, her morning routine precise and unvarying. As she prepared for her shift, the secure terminal on her desk chimed with an incoming message. The notification displayed Colonel Matthews' credentials, requesting her presence in his office 30 minutes before her scheduled duty. The message contained no details about the purpose of the meeting, but Olivia had little doubt it concerned her latest report. She arrived at the colonel's office exactly 5 minutes early, her uniform impeccable, her notebook tucked under her arm. The space reflected Matthews' military precision awards and commendations arranged in perfect alignment on the walls, desk organized with geometric exactitude, nothing personal or extraneous to distract from the business of national security. Colonel Matthews looked up from his terminal as she entered. "Major Mercer, thank you for coming." He gestured to the chair across from his desk. "I've reviewed your report on the Kamchatka anomalies." "Yes, sir." Olivia remained outwardly calm, though her pulse had quickened slightly. Matthews tapped his screen, bringing up her detailed analysis. "Your documentation is, as always, thorough. But I'm concerned about the conclusions you're drawing from limited data points. The pattern is consistent across 17 separate occurrences, sir. The correlation with known testing protocols exceeds 87% when adjusted for scale. I understand that, Major, but these energy signatures remain well below established detection thresholds. They could represent any number of legitimate activities, research facilities, civilian infrastructure, even natural phenomena that happen to occur in rhythmic patterns. Olivia had anticipated this response. I've run comprehensive analyses against all known legitimate activities in the region. The correlation factors are significantly lower than for weapons testing, 42% for research facilities, 28% for civilian infrastructure, 17% for natural phenomena. Matthews sighed, leaning back in his chair. Major Mercer, your attention to detail has always been exemplary. But this fixation on patterns that fall below reporting thresholds has become problematic. We have established protocols based on decades of intelligence experience and technological development. Protocols designed for conventional threats, sir. The patterns I'm tracking suggest deliberate efforts to exploit the gaps in those protocols. The Colonel's expression hardened slightly. Are you suggesting that our entire detection infrastructure is fundamentally flawed? Not flawed, sir. Just optimized for certain types of threats while potentially vulnerable to others, specifically designed to exploit its parameters. Matthews studied her for a long moment. Major, I'm going to be direct with you. Your reputation for thoroughness is well established. But there's a growing concern that your focus on anomalies has become excessive, perhaps even detrimental to your primary duties. The implication was clear, and it struck deeper than Olivia expected. Sir, I have never neglected my assigned responsibilities. My performance evaluations have consistently ranked in the top percentile. Your technical performance is not in question, Matthews clarified. But your judgment, your ability to distinguish between meaningful patterns and statistical noise has raised concerns among the command staff. Because I document anomalies that others dismiss, Olivia stated, keeping her voice level despite the familiar frustration rising within her. Because you persist in seeing threats where more experienced analysts see routine variations, Matthews corrected. This latest report is a case in point. You've taken minimal data points and constructed an elaborate theory about covert weapons testing, based primarily on pattern recognition that only you seem able to discern. Major Wells also recognized the pattern significance, Olivia pointed out. Matthew's eyebrows rose slightly. Yes, after you specifically directed his attention to it. That's not independent verification, Major. The dismissal was so complete, so fundamental that Olivia felt momentarily adrift. Years of meticulous observation and analysis reduced to the delusions of an obsessive mind. The weight of collective judgment, paranoid, conspiracy theorist, chaser of ghosts pressed against her professional identity. Colonel, she said, choosing her words with careful precision, I understand that my methods are unconventional. But the potential consequences of ignoring these anomalies, if they do represent what I believe they do, are catastrophic. All I'm requesting is further investigation satellite resources, directed specifically at the coordinates during the next projected testing window. Matthews shook his head. We don't have the resource capacity to investigate every anomaly that falls below established thresholds. The satellite grid is fully allocated to monitoring verified threats and scheduled activities. He closed her report file with a decisive tap. Your concerns have been noted, Major, but unless these energy signatures cross into reportable thresholds, no further action will be authorized. Olivia recognized the tone of final decision. Further argument would only reinforce the perception of unhealthy fixation. Yes, sir, I understand. Good. Matthew's expression softened slightly. You're a valuable officer, Major Mercer. Your technical skills are exceptional, and your dedication is unquestioned. But I would strongly advise you to focus on your primary responsibilities and leave these theoretical patterns aside for now." The conversation was clearly over. Olivia stood, saluted with perfect form, and left the office with her professional dignity intact despite the internal weight of dismissal. In the corridor outside, she paused to gather her composure, the colonel's words echoing in her mind. The assessment was not new. She had heard variations of it throughout her career, but it never became easier to bear. She made her way to the command center, passing through security checkpoints with automatic precision, her thoughts focused on the implications of Matthew's decision. Without dedicated satellite surveillance, her ability to verify the Kamchatka anomalies would remain limited to the existing detection infrastructure system specifically designed to ignore the very signatures she was tracking. The command center hummed with its usual activity officers at monitoring stations, technicians running diagnostics, the large central displays showing global hotspots and surveillance feeds. Lieutenant Colonel Davidson glanced up as she entered, a knowing smile suggesting he was already aware of her meeting with Matthews. Olivia moved to her station without acknowledging the looks that followed her. She set her notebook beside her keyboard, logged into her systems, and began her standard monitoring protocols with characteristic thoroughness. Whatever personal frustration she felt remained contained behind her professional demeanor. Major Wells approached during a quiet moment, keeping his voice low. "I heard Matthews shut down your request for dedicated surveillance. Word travels fast," Olivia observed, continuing to scan her assigned sectors. "Fast enough." Wells leaned against her desk, positioning himself to block their conversation from immediate view. "I've been thinking about those energy signatures. If they are what you suspect, the next testing window should open within 48 hours, based on the established pattern." Olivia nodded. "Tomorrow at 0430, if the sequence holds consistent." "There might be another way to get verification," Wells suggested. "The Pacific Command maintains a separate satellite network for regional monitoring. Different parameters, different thresholds. I still have access codes that could temporarily redirect a low-orbit platform during the projected window." The suggestion caught Olivia by surprise. That would be outside protocol, potentially a career-ending decision if you're wrong. "If we're right, it could be world-saving," Wells countered. "And technically, I'd just be conducting a routine calibration check of systems I'm already authorized to access." Olivia considered the offer carefully. After years of working strictly within the system, the thought of circumventing official channels, even for compelling reasons, raised immediate concerns. But the potential consequences of missing a genuine threat outweighed those concerns. "I'll send you the precise coordinates and time window," she said finally. "But this has to be your decision, not something I've pressured you into." Wells nodded, understanding the implications. "I'll handle it. Just be ready to analyze whatever comes through." As he moved away from her station, Olivia felt a complex mixture of emotions: relief at the possibility of verification, anxiety about operating outside established protocols, and a small spark of validation that someone else considered her. Concerns legitimate enough to risk professional consequences. The rest of her shift proceeded with routine precision. She completed her assigned monitoring tasks, ran system diagnostics, and maintained the detached professionalism that had become her trademark. But beneath that calm exterior, her mind was calculating probabilities, reviewing pattern analyses, and preparing for the possibility that tomorrow might finally provide the evidence she had been seeking. When her shift ended, she returned to her quarters and spent several hours refining her analysis of the Kamchatka anomalies. If Wells succeeded in redirecting satellite coverage, she would need to be prepared to interpret the data quickly and accurately. The window would be brief, perhaps. Only minutes before the resource would need to be returned to its primary assignment. As she worked, Olivia confronted the possibility that she was wrong, that the patterns she had detected were indeed just random noise, meaningless coincidences that she had assembled into a threat narrative through her own predisposition to see dangers others missed. The thought was uncomfortable but necessary to consider. But the mathematics supported her theory. The timing intervals, energy profiles, and geographical clustering all pointed toward deliberate coordinated activity rather than random events. The correlation with known testing protocols was too precise to dismiss as coincidence. Whatever doubts she harbored, the data itself remained compelling. Olivia closed her notebook and prepared for sleep, knowing that tomorrow might finally provide the verification she had sought, or the evidence that her colleagues had been right to question her judgment all along. Either outcome would carry significant consequences, both professionally and personally. As artificial night settled over the underground facility, she lay awake, reviewing mental calculations and probability analyses. The question that had followed her throughout her career echoed in her thoughts. Was she seeing patterns that others missed because of superior attention to detail, or creating patterns from random noise due to an obsessive need to find order? In chaos? Tomorrow, one way or another, she might finally have an answer. The facility's artificial dawn arrived with mechanical precision, lights gradually brightening to simulate sunrise in the windowless underground complex. Olivia woke before her alarm, the weight of anticipation having kept her sleep light and interrupted. Today might finally provide the evidence she needed or confirm that her years of meticulous observation had led her down a path of false patterns and imagined threats. She dressed with practiced efficiency, reviewing mental calculations of timing windows and coordinate projections. If the pattern held consistent, the next anomalous energy signature from Kamchatka would appear at 0430, lasting between 7 and 12 minutes based on previous occurrences. Wells had promised to redirect a Pacific Command satellite during that window, a professional risk that could end his career if discovered without justification. Olivia arrived at the command center 30 minutes early, using the quiet pre-shift time to prepare her systems for the incoming data. Her regular monitoring station wasn't configured to receive direct satellite feeds, a limitation that reflected her position in the operational hierarchy, but Wells had arranged for the information to be routed through a secondary diagnostic terminal that she could access without raising immediate questions. The command center operated continuously, with overlapping shifts ensuring constant surveillance. The night crew was still at their posts, officers moving through end-of-shift procedures with the weary precision of people finishing a long watch. Lieutenant Ross, who would be relieved by Wells when the morning shift began, nodded to Olivia as she passed his station. "Early again, Mercer?" he commented, his tone neutral. "Davidson's not even here to appreciate your dedication." "Just getting a head start," she replied, settling at her terminal and beginning her system checks. The artificial environment made time feel abstract, disconnected from natural rhythms. Olivia tracked the minutes through the digital clock on her console, watching as 0400 approached and passed. The command center gradually filled with morning shift personnel, officers moving to their assigned stations and beginning handover procedures. With the night crew, Major Wells arrived at 0415, exchanging brief reports with Lieutenant Ross before taking control of his monitoring sector. He caught Olivia's eye across the room and gave an almost imperceptible nod. The plan was in motion. At precisely 0427, Olivia's secure terminal received a notification of incoming diagnostic data. Wells had successfully redirected the Pacific Command satellite. She entered her authentication codes and opened the data stream, careful to maintain her regular monitoring duties on her primary screen, while the satellite feed loaded on her secondary display. The image that appeared made her breath catch momentarily. The satellite's high-resolution cameras showed a remote section of the Kamchatka Peninsula, Zoomed to coordinates she had calculated based on triangulation of previous energy signatures. The terrain was rugged, mountainous, with heavy forest cover in the valleys and snow-capped peaks rising sharply against the horizon. At first glance, the area appeared uninhabited, no visible structures, roads, or evidence of human activity. But Olivia's trained eye immediately detected the carefully concealed installation nestled in a narrow valley. The facility was partially underground, with surface elements camouflaged to blend with the surrounding landscape. Without specific focus on those exact coordinates, it would have been nearly impossible to distinguish from natural terrain features. As she watched, a section of the forest floor slid sideways, revealing what appeared to be a launch platform rising from beneath the ground. The movement was slow, deliberate, designed to minimize detection by standard satellite sweeps that might pass over the area too quickly to notice the subtle change. Olivia began documenting immediately, capturing still images from the feed and noting precise timestamps. The platform continued its emergence, eventually revealing a missile unlike any she had seen in standard briefings. The design was sleek, compact, with unusual stabilizing fins and what appeared to be specialized shielding around its propulsion system. The clock read 0432 when the first energy signature appeared on her monitors, exactly as her pattern analysis had predicted. The signature matched the previous anomaly she had documented, but now she could see its source: pre-launch testing sequences being run on a weapons system, specifically designed to evade detection. For 3 minutes and 42 seconds, Olivia watched as the facility conducted what appeared to be the final stages of testing before actual deployment. The missile remained on the platform, but systems were clearly being activated in sequence, each producing the distinctive energy pattern she had been tracking for weeks. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the platform began lowering back into its underground housing. The forest floor panel slid back into place, concealing all evidence of the facility's existence. By 0438, the satellite showed nothing but untouched wilderness, a perfect deception that would fool anyone not looking at exactly the right place at precisely the right time. Olivia secured the images and data to her personal drive, heart racing despite her outward calm. She had been right. The anomalies were real, deliberate, and represented exactly what she had feared: a weapons system designed to operate beneath detection thresholds, being prepared for deployment from a covert facility. As the satellite feed ended, Wells would need to return the resource to its assigned monitoring zone before its diversion was noticed. Olivia caught his eye across the command center. His expression remained professionally neutral, but she could see the concern in his gaze. He had seen the same feed, understood the same implications. The evidence was now irrefutable, but presenting it would reveal that they had operated outside protocol, diverted resources without authorization, and potentially violated numerous regulations governing surveillance operations. The consequences could end both their careers, unless the threat was deemed significant enough to justify their actions. Olivia spent the next 2 hours completing her regular monitoring duties, while carefully organizing the evidence she had gathered. The satellite imagery, combined with her weeks of documented anomalies, created a compelling case for immediate action. The missile's design characteristics, the covert nature of the facility, and the deliberate efforts to operate beneath detection thresholds all pointed toward hostile intent. When Colonel Matthews arrived for the morning briefing, Olivia requested a private meeting through official channels. The response came back within minutes, 15 minutes in his office following the briefing. The brevity suggested irritation, but at least he was willing to see her. The briefing proceeded with standard updates on global monitoring zones, system status reports, and intelligence summaries from various sectors. No mention was made of the Kamchatka region. The official detection systems had registered nothing unusual, exactly as the facility's designers had intended. When the briefing concluded, Olivia made her way to Matthew's office, data drive secured in her pocket, notebook tucked under her arm. She had rehearsed her presentation mentally, focusing on the evidence rather than the means by which it was acquired. The facts themselves were too significant to be dismissed, regardless of procedural violations. Colonel Matthews was reviewing reports when she entered, his expression suggesting limited patience for what he likely assumed would be another of her theories. Major Mercer, you requested this meeting. I assume it's about your Kamchatka anomalies again. Yes, sir. I have conclusive evidence now. She placed her drive on his desk. This contains satellite imagery of a covert launch facility conducting pre-deployment tests of an unregistered weapon system, captured this morning at 0430 hours. Matthew's expression shifted from impatience to sharp focus. Satellite imagery? How did you acquire satellite coverage of that region? No resources were allocated to your investigation. The question hit directly at the procedural violation, as Olivia had known it would. Sir, the evidence itself is what matters. The facility is deliberately operating beneath our detection thresholds, testing a missile system designed to evade our monitoring capabilities. Major, I asked you a direct question. Matthew's voice had taken on the edge that accompanied serious disciplinary concerns. How did you acquire this satellite imagery? Olivia met his gaze steadily. Through unofficial channels, sir. I believed the potential threat warranted extraordinary measures. You diverted surveillance resources without authorization. It wasn't a question. I facilitated the acquisition of critical intelligence regarding a significant threat to national security, Olivia countered, maintaining her professional composure. The satellite imagery confirms what my anomaly tracking has suggested for weeks, a deliberate effort to prepare stealth weapons, technology for deployment while evading international monitoring systems. Matthews studied her for a long moment, conflict evident in his expression. As a commanding officer, he couldn't ignore the unauthorized use of classified resources. But as a security professional, he couldn't dismiss evidence of a potential threat, regardless of how it was obtained. Show me, he said finally, inserting the drive into his secure terminal. The images appeared on his screen, the concealed facility, the emerging platform, the distinctive missile with its specialized shielding. Matthews leaned forward, his attention completely focused on the evidence before him. This was captured today. You're certain of the location? Yes, sir. The coordinates match precisely with the triangulated source of the energy anomalies I've been tracking. The facility is designed to be invisible to standard satellite sweeps. The platform is exposed for less than 12 minutes during each testing sequence. Matthew's expression grew increasingly grave as he reviewed the imagery. This missile design, it doesn't match any known Russian systems in our database. No, sir. Its configuration suggests a medium-range ballistic delivery system with stealth capabilities specifically designed to penetrate defense systems without triggering early warning protocols. The colonel sat back in his chair, the disciplinary concerns temporarily overshadowed by the security implications. If this is what it appears to be, we're looking at a deliberate treaty violation and a significant escalation in strategic capabilities. He fixed Olivia with a penetrating look. But that doesn't explain or excuse how you acquired this intelligence. Sir, with respect, I attempted to work through official channels. My reports were dismissed as speculative. My request for dedicated surveillance was denied. The pattern was clear, the timing window was narrow, and the potential consequences of missing this development were catastrophic. I made a judgment call. A judgment call that violated direct orders and military protocol, Matthews pointed out, though his tone had lost some of its edge. Yes, sir. I accept full responsibility for that decision and any consequences it entails. Olivia's voice remained steady. But I stand by the assessment that led to it. This facility represents a clear and present danger that our standard Detection systems were designed to miss. Matthews was silent for several moments, studying both the evidence on his screen and the officer standing before him. When he spoke again, his voice had taken on a thoughtful quality. "You've been tracking anomalies like this for years. How many have proven significant?" The question caught Olivia by surprise. 7 have led to system upgrades or protocol adjustments. 3 have identified equipment malfunctions before they became critical. This is the first that has revealed a direct external threat. And how many have led nowhere? Been dismissed as statistical noise or random variations? Dozens, Olivia admitted. But each was documented based on pattern recognition and data analysis, not speculation or paranoia. The fact that many proved insignificant doesn't invalidate the methodology that identified those that weren't. Matthews nodded slowly. "No, it doesn't." He seemed to come to a decision. "I need to take this up the chain immediately. The intelligence is too significant to ignore, regardless of how it was obtained." He secured the drive and rose from his desk. "Return to your station. Major, continue your regular duties. Say nothing about this to anyone, including Major Wells. I'll handle the next steps." "Sir, what about the procedural violations?" Matthews finished for her. "Those will be addressed after we've determined the full scope of the threat. For now, your focus should be on maintaining normal operations while we verify this intelligence through official channels." Olivia recognized the dismissal in his tone. "Yes, sir." She returned to the command center where the morning shift was fully engaged in routine monitoring activities. Wells glanced up as she passed his station, a question in his eyes that she answered with a slight shake of her head. "Not here, not now." The next 4 hours passed with excruciating slowness. Olivia completed her assigned tasks with mechanical precision, her mind racing through potential scenarios and outcomes. The evidence was too compelling to be dismissed, even with the procedural violations. But the consequences for acquiring that evidence could still be severe. Shortly after midday, Colonel Matthews returned to the command center accompanied by 2 officers Olivia didn't recognize. Their insignia identified them as representatives from Strategic Command, the highest level of nuclear defense oversight. Their presence immediately changed the atmosphere in the room, conversations falling silent as they moved toward the central briefing area. "Attention," Matthews called, his voice carrying authority that silenced even the murmured speculations. "We have a situation developing that requires immediate response. All personnel are to maintain current monitoring protocols while strategic assessment is conducted." The visiting officers began reviewing data at the central command station, their expressions grave as they examined information now flowing through official channels. Olivia continued her assigned duties, aware of increasing activity around the command center as additional personnel were called in and security protocols elevated. 2 hours later, Matthews approached her station. "Major Mercer, your presence is requested in briefing room. Bring your full documentation on the Kamchatka anomalies." The briefing room was already occupied when she arrived. The Strategic Command officers sat at the head of the table, surrounded by facility leadership and analysis specialists. Major Wells was present, his expression carefully neutral as she entered. Colonel Matthews gestured to an empty seat. "Major, these gentlemen have reviewed your evidence and conducted independent verification through official channels. Please present your complete analysis of the situation." Olivia opened her notebook and connected her data drive to the room's secure system. The familiar patterns and anomalies she had been tracking for weeks appeared on the main display, followed by the satellite imagery that confirmed her suspicions. "As you can see," she began, her voice steady and professional, "the energy signatures follow a precise pattern consistent with pre-launch testing protocols. The facility is deliberately operating beneath standard detection thresholds, using a combination of physical concealment and reduced energy outputs to avoid triggering automated alerts. She walked them through her analysis, from the first anomaly she had detected 17 days earlier to the confirmed visual evidence of the missile system. The strategic command officers interrupted occasionally with technical questions, their expertise evident in the precision of their inquiries. Based on the design characteristics visible in the satellite imagery, Olivia continued, the weapon appears to be a medium-range ballistic missile with specialized shielding and reduced thermal signature. Its capabilities would allow it to penetrate defensive perimeters without triggering early warning systems, a first-strike weapon designed for surprise deployment. And you detected this through manual analysis of sub-threshold anomalies? One of the strategic command officers asked, his tone suggesting both skepticism and growing respect. Yes, sir. The automated systems are calibrated to filter out low-level signatures to prevent false positives. This facility is specifically designed to exploit that filtration process. The officer exchanged glances with his colleague. Your pattern recognition methodology is unusual, Major, but the results speak for themselves. Independent verification has confirmed everything you've presented. Colonel Matthews cleared his throat. The question now becomes, what is the appropriate response to this intelligence? The facility represents a clear treaty violation and potential first-strike capability being developed in secret. The senior strategic command officer leaned forward. Based on the testing sequence Major Mercer has documented, we believe the system is in final preparation for deployment. The acceleration of testing intervals suggests readiness within 72 hours. Olivia felt a chill at the timeline. Her anomaly tracking had revealed more than just a secret development program. It had potentially uncovered an imminent threat. We're implementing a Level 2 strategic response, the officer continued. All early warning systems are being recalibrated to detect the specific signature of this weapons platform. Diplomatic channels have been activated to address the treaty violation directly. And if diplomatic efforts fail? Matthews asked the question that hung in the air. Then we move to Level 3 contingencies. The implications were clear. Military options would be prepared if diplomatic solutions proved ineffective. The briefing continued for another hour, with Olivia providing detailed analysis of each documented anomaly and answering technical questions about detection methodologies. When it finally concluded, the sense of crisis had only deepened. What had begun as her isolated concern had escalated into a high-level strategic response involving multiple agencies and command structures. As the room cleared, the senior strategic command officer approached her. Major Mercer, your analysis work is impressive. Unconventional, but impressive. We'll need you to continue monitoring for any changes in the testing pattern while recalibration of the automated systems is implemented. Yes, sir. Olivia gathered her materials, aware that her role had shifted dramatically in just a few hours from suspected paranoid to essential analyst. Colonel Matthews remained behind as the others filed out. When they were alone, he fixed her with a serious look. The procedural violations remain a matter for review, Major. Unauthorized use of classified resources cannot be simply overlooked, regardless of the outcome. I understand, sir. However, he continued, his tone softening slightly, the significance of the intelligence you uncovered will certainly factor into any disciplinary consideration. Your actions may have been outside protocol, but they were motivated by legitimate security concerns that have now been validated. It was as close to approval as she was likely to receive, given the circumstances. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me yet, Major. We're potentially facing a serious international crisis. Your detection work was just the beginning. Now we need to determine if this is an isolated development or part of a larger strategic shift, and we need to do it before that missile system becomes operational. The implications hung heavily in the air between them. What had started as anomalies in the data patterns only she had recognized as significant had revealed a threat with potentially catastrophic consequences. The validation of her methods came with the sobering reality that those methods had uncovered a path to possible conflict. As Olivia returned to her station in the command center, she was met with a noticeably different reception than she had experienced that morning. Officers who had previously dismissed her attention to detail now glanced at her with newfound respect. Lieutenant Colonel Davidson, who had been her most vocal critic, was conspicuously silent as she passed his console. Major Wells intercepted her near her monitoring station, keeping his voice low. "They've confirmed everything through official channels now. Your pattern analysis was spot on." "Yes," Olivia replied simply, the validation bringing less satisfaction than she might have expected. Being right about this particular threat meant being right about a dangerous escalation in global tensions. "They're talking about sending you to Strategic Command Headquarters," Wells continued. "Your detection methodology could be implemented across the entire early warning network." The prospect was both professionally validating and personally daunting. After years of working in isolation, having her approach recognized and potentially standardized represented a fundamental shift in how her expertise would be viewed and utilized. "Nothing's been decided yet," she said, unwilling to speculate on outcomes while the immediate crisis remained unresolved. "For now, we need to maintain continuous monitoring of the facility. If their testing sequence accelerates further, it could indicate imminent deployment." Wells nodded, understanding her focus on the immediate threat rather than potential career implications. "I'll coordinate with Pacific Command to ensure we have continuous satellite coverage of the site. No more unauthorized diversions necessary." The slight smile that accompanied his words acknowledged their shared risk-taking while recognizing that it was no longer required. The evidence had been secured, verified, and elevated to the highest levels of strategic response. The system that had initially dismissed her concerns was now fully engaged with addressing them. Olivia settled at her monitoring station, adjusting parameters to optimize detection of the specific energy signatures she had been tracking. The command center hummed with increased activity around her, additional personnel brought in to manage the elevated alert status. Communication channels opened with strategic assets around the globe. The isolation that had defined her professional experience for so long had been replaced by integration into a critical response team. Her expertise, once dismissed as obsessive attention to meaningless details, was now central to addressing a verified threat. The validation should have felt triumphant, but instead carried the weight of potential consequences far beyond personal vindication. As the facility shifted to crisis footing, Olivia continued her methodical monitoring, watching for any change in the pattern that might indicate the threat was accelerating. The notebook that had once symbolized her supposed paranoia now represented the documentation that had revealed a genuine danger proof that sometimes the most important signals were the ones designed to be missed, and the most valuable observers were those willing to look beyond established parameters. The quiet vigilance that had isolated her had become the foundation for a strategic response that might prevent catastrophe if they could act quickly enough to address what her pattern recognition had uncovered. The next 72 hours would determine whether her discovery had come in time to prevent a crisis or merely in time to respond to one. Olivia checked her monitoring system once more, adjusting parameters with the precision that had become her trademark. Whatever came next, she would continue watching, continue documenting, continue trusting that the patterns she saw were meaningful, because now she knew with certainty that sometimes they truly were matters of life and death. The command center's normal rhythm had been replaced by the focused intensity of crisis operations. Additional monitoring stations had been activated, communications channels opened with strategic assets worldwide, and security protocols elevated to reflect the potential threat level. What had been routine surveillance had transformed into targeted tracking of a specific facility and weapons system. Olivia remained at her console, continuously refining detection parameters to capture any change in the pattern she'd been following for weeks. The validation of her methods had brought no respite from vigilance, if anything. It had intensified her focus, knowing now that her observations had uncovered a genuine threat with global implications. Major Mercer. The voice came from behind. Her, belonging to Brigadier General Howard from Strategic Command, who had arrived with additional personnel an hour earlier. I need your assessment of this latest data set. He placed a tablet beside her keyboard, displaying new satellite imagery of the Kamchatka facility captured through official channels. The resolution was higher than what she had obtained through Wells' diverted resource, revealing additional details of the installation's structure and capabilities. Olivia studied the images carefully, comparing them to her earlier observations. The missile system appears to be in final configuration, sir. The testing interval has shortened by approximately 18% since my first detection, suggesting accelerated preparation for deployment. That matches our assessment, Howard confirmed. Based on the progression you've documented, when would you project operational readiness? Olivia calculated quickly, extrapolating from the established pattern. Between 36 and 48 hours, assuming the current acceleration rate holds consistent. The general's expression remained professionally neutral, but tension showed in the set of his shoulders. That's a narrower window than we'd prefer for diplomatic resolution. The facility appears designed for rapid deployment, sir. The underground housing, concealed platform, and reduced energy signature all suggest an emphasis on surprise capability rather than sustained operations. Howard nodded slowly. A first strike. Weapon, as you initially assessed. He reclaimed the tablet, studying the imagery once more. Your pattern recognition methodology is being implemented across the strategic early warning network as we speak. We can't risk missing similar developments elsewhere. The information struck Olivia with its implications. Her approach, once dismissed as obsessive and paranoid, was now being adopted as standard procedure throughout the defense infrastructure. The validation was profound but carried the sobering recognition that such adoption came only after a critical threat had nearly gone undetected. Sir, she ventured, the automated systems would still filter out these signatures as noise. The pattern recognition requires human analysis and correlation to be effective. We're aware of that limitation, Major. That's why we're establishing a dedicated anomaly tracking division within Strategic Command. Officers with appropriate aptitude will be trained in your methodology. Howard fixed her with a direct look. We'll need you to develop the training protocols once this immediate situation is resolved. The assignment represented both professional recognition and a fundamental shift in how defense systems would operate, incorporating human intuition and pattern recognition alongside automated detection. It was exactly what Olivia had advocated for years, though she had never expected it to be implemented as a direct result of crisis. I understand, sir. I'll prepare preliminary documentation of my methodology. Howard nodded and moved on, returning to the central command station where senior officers were coordinating the strategic response. Olivia turned back to her monitoring duties, processing the implications of what the general had shared while maintaining her focus on the immediate threat. 4 hours later, a new alert appeared on her screen. The energy signature from the Kamchatka facility had changed subtle modifications to the pattern that suggested a significant shift in operations. She analyzed the data carefully, comparing it to previous readings and calculating the implications. Sir, she called to Colonel Matthews, who was reviewing reports nearby. The facility has altered its testing sequence. The energy profile shows characteristics consistent with final launch preparation rather than continued evaluation. Matthews was at her station in seconds, joined moments later by General Howard. Both men studied the data as Olivia highlighted the specific changes she had detected. The timeline is accelerating, she explained, pointing to the modified energy pattern. Based on these readings, the system could be deployment ready within 24 hours, possibly less. Howard's expression darkened. That's significantly ahead of previous projections. Could it be a response to our increased surveillance? Have they detected our focus on the facility? Unlikely, sir, Olivia replied. The satellite coverage has been passive rather than active scanning. More probable is that this was the intended timeline all along, and the previous testing schedule was deliberately misleading, designed to suggest a longer development process than actually planned. The strategic implications were immediate and severe. If the weapon system was preparing for deployment within 24 hours, diplomatic channels would have minimal time to address the treaty violation before facing a fait accompli. Once operational, the missile stealth capabilities would make it virtually undetectable until launch, exactly as its designers had intended. We need to elevate to Level 3 response immediately, Howard decided, already moving toward the secure communication station, and prepare contingency options for preemptive neutralization of the facility if diplomatic efforts fail. The command center's activity intensified further as the alert level increased. Additional personnel were called to duty, security protocols tightened, and communication established with strategic assets, positioned to respond if necessary. The atmosphere had shifted from focused concern to controlled urgency, the possibility of armed conflict, now real and immediate. Olivia continued monitoring the facility's energy signatures, tracking minute changes that might indicate further acceleration or operational adjustments. The patterns remained consistent with final preparation, suggesting that deployment was proceeding according to schedule, despite the international attention now focused on the site. Major Wells approached her station during a brief lull in the escalating activity. They're saying your detection work may have prevented a strategic surprise that could have altered the global balance of power, he said quietly. The missile system would have been deployed and operational before anyone realized it existed. We don't know that for certain, Olivia replied, unwilling to accept premature credit for crisis aversion. And we still don't know how this situation will resolve. No, Wells acknowledged, but we know it won't be a surprise now. Whatever happens, it will happen with full awareness and preparation, rather than as an ambush against unsuspecting defenses. The distinction was significant. A weapon designed for stealth deployment had been exposed before it could become operational, its primary advantage neutralized by human attention to details that automated systems had been programmed to ignore. Throughout the night, Olivia maintained her vigil at the monitoring station, tracking every fluctuation in the facility's energy signature. The command center operated at full capacity around her, strategic assets positioned, diplomatic channels engaged, contingency plans prepared for every possible outcome. Shortly after 0300, the pattern changed again, a sudden intensification of energy output, followed by a complete cessation of all signatures. Olivia analyzed the readings carefully, correlating them with satellite imagery that showed increased activity around the facility's perimeter. Sir, she called to General Howard, who had remained on site throughout the crisis. The facility has gone completely dark. All energy signatures have terminated, and there's evidence of personnel evacuation from the site. Howard joined her immediately, studying the data with focused intensity. Assessment? They've been compromised and they know it, Olivia replied, pointing to the satellite imagery showing vehicles leaving the area. The diplomatic pressure and obvious surveillance have rendered the stealth deployment strategy non-viable. They appear to be abandoning the facility rather than risking direct confrontation. The general studied the evidence for several long moments before nodding slowly. Concur with your assessment. They gambled on secrecy and lost when your pattern recognition exposed their operation. Now they're cutting their losses. Over the Next 2 hours, satellite confirmation arrived showing the facility being systematically abandoned, equipment removed, and entrances sealed. The missile that had been prepared for deployment was nowhere visible in the imagery, either removed or returned to underground storage. By dawn, Strategic Command had verified that the immediate threat had been neutralized. The diplomatic channels had delivered unmistakable messages about awareness of the treaty violation and readiness to respond if deployment proceeded. Faced with exposure before achieving operational status, the stealth weapon had lost its primary advantage. As the crisis level was gradually downgraded, Olivia found herself in a strange position. The analyst whose paranoid attention to detail had potentially prevented a major strategic shift and the escalation toward armed conflict it might have triggered. The patterns she had detected, documented, and insisted were significant had proven to be exactly that, evidence of a threat, deliberately designed to evade standard detection methods. Colonel Matthews approached her as the command center began. Returning to normal operations. "Major Mercer," he said, his tone carrying a note she hadn't heard from him before. "Strategic Command has requested your transfer to their Central Analysis Division, effective immediately. They want your pattern recognition methodology implemented across the entire early warning network." The assignment represented the highest possible validation of her approach and an acknowledgement that the system had been wrong to dismiss her concerns as paranoia. But Olivia's response was measured, focused on the broader implications rather than personal vindication. "Sir, my methodology requires allowing analysts to follow intuitive pattern recognition, even when automated systems dismiss the data as noise. It means accepting that sometimes the most important signals are deliberately designed to appear insignificant." Matthews nodded slowly. "A lesson that's been well learned over the past 48 hours. Your transfer orders include authority to implement training protocols and system modifications consistent with your approach." He hesitated, then added with evident difficulty, "Your attention to detail saved lives, Major. Potentially many lives." As the command center settled into recovery operations, Olivia gathered her notes and prepared for the transition to her new assignment. The notebook that had once symbolized her supposed obsession would now become the foundation for a new approach to strategic detection, one that recognized the value of human intuition alongside technological capability. The patterns she had seen when others saw only noise had revealed a threat specifically designed to exploit the gaps in automated systems. Her persistence in tracking those patterns, despite dismissal and ridicule, had potentially prevented a crisis that could have escalated toward catastrophic conflict. As she prepared to leave the facility where she had worked in isolation for so long, Olivia reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The years of careful documentation, of seeing connections others missed, of maintaining vigilance when conventional wisdom suggested otherwise, all had been validated in the most consequential way possible. The analysts they had called paranoid had seen truth in the patterns. The conspiracy theories they had dismissed had proven to be accurate assessments of deliberate deception. The quiet persistence that had isolated her had ultimately prevented a strategic surprise that could have altered the balance of global power. In the end, the most important lesson wasn't about vindication or recognition. It was about the value of perspectives that challenge conventional parameters, the critical importance of minds that question established assumptions and see patterns that automated systems are programmed to ignore. Sometimes Olivia reflected, as she closed her notebook for the final time in that facility, the difference between paranoia and prescience was simply a matter of whether the patterns proved real. And sometimes the most important signals were the ones designed to be missed by everyone except those patient and persistent enough to look for them. The Strategic Command headquarters rose from the Virginia landscape like a monument to national security, a complex of reinforced buildings, surrounded by layers of physical and electronic defenses. Olivia stood at the entrance to the Analysis Division, her credentials verified and clearance confirmed. About to step into a role she could hardly have imagined 2 weeks earlier. The transition had been swift and decisive. Within hours of the Kamchatka facility's abandonment, her transfer orders had been processed at the highest levels. The analyst, once dismissed as paranoid, was now considered essential personnel in the restructuring of America's early warning systems. The irony wasn't lost on her, though she took no particular satisfaction from it. Being right about a genuine threat meant being right about a danger that could have had catastrophic consequences. General Howard met her in the main corridor, his brisk handshake communicating both respect and urgency. "Major Mercer, welcome to Strategic Command. Your workspace is ready, and we've assembled a team to implement your detection methodology across the network." He led her through security checkpoints and into the heart of the complex, where analysts worked at stations more advanced than anything in her previous facility. The screens displayed global monitoring data in real time, tracking everything from satellite movements to communication patterns across potential threat zones. "Your detection of the Kamchatka operation has forced a fundamental reassessment of our approach," Howard explained as they walked. The automated systems performed exactly as designed, filtering out low-level signatures to prevent false positives. And they completely missed a weapons platform that could have altered the strategic balance. "The systems are optimized for efficiency, sir," Olivia observed. "They're designed to manage massive data volumes by eliminating what programmers deemed irrelevant, but that creates exploitable gaps. Gaps that human intuition and pattern recognition can identify," Howard agreed. "Which is why you're here. We need to implement your methodology while maintaining operational efficiency. It's a complex balance." They reached a large conference room where 8 officers waited, each representing different components of the strategic detection network. Their expressions ranged from open curiosity to thinly veiled skepticism, microcosm of the reactions her work had always generated. "Major Mercer will be leading the implementation of new detection protocols based on her work at Wyoming," Howard announced. Her pattern recognition methodology identified a stealth weapons platform that our standard systems completely missed. "I expect full cooperation with her recommendations." Olivia recognized the challenge before her. Changing established procedures in a military organization required more than just being right. It required navigating institutional resistance, overcoming entrenched thinking, and demonstrating value that outweighed the costs of adaptation. "Thank you, General," she said, stepping forward. "I understand the skepticism some of you may have. I've faced it throughout my career. But the Kamchatka incident demonstrated that our current detection parameters have vulnerabilities that can be exploited by adversaries who understand our filtration algorithms." She connected her notebook to the room's display system, showing the progression of anomalies she had tracked leading to the discovery of the secret facility. These signatures were dismissed as background noise by automated systems. They appeared random and insignificant when viewed individually. But when tracked over time and analyzed for pattern consistency, they revealed deliberate testing of a weapon system designed specifically to evade our detection thresholds. Commander Phillips, the senior technical officer on the team, leaned forward with obvious doubt. "You're suggesting we modify systems that process exabytes of surveillance data to accommodate manual tracking of signals we've specifically programmed? Them to ignore? The false positive rate would be astronomical." "I'm not suggesting we eliminate filtration," Olivia clarified. "I'm proposing we create a parallel tracking system for anomalies that fall just below reporting thresholds, especially those that demonstrate timing patterns or signature characteristics consistent with known testing protocols." The resource allocation would be significant, another officer pointed out. "We don't have analysts to manually review everything the automated systems filter out." "We don't need to review everything," Olivia countered. We need targeted monitoring of specific signature types in high-interest regions with pattern recognition algorithms designed to flag potential correlations for human analysis. The discussion continued for hours, with Olivia addressing technical concerns, resource limitations, and implementation challenges. Her responses were precise and thorough, reflecting years of thinking about these very issues, while her concerns were dismissed in her previous position. By the end of the meeting, even the most skeptical officers had acknowledged the need for adjustment, though disagreements remained about scope and implementation. General Howard closed the session with clear direction. Major Mercer will lead the development of a parallel detection protocol to be tested alongside our current systems. I want preliminary implementation within 2 weeks. As the team dispersed, Commander Phillips lingered, studying Olivia with a thoughtful expression. "You've clearly been considering these issues for years," he observed. "Why didn't anyone listen before it took a crisis to prove you right?" The question was genuine rather than confrontational, and Olivia considered it carefully. "Because functioning systems resist change until failure becomes impossible to ignore. My concerns were theoretical until Kamchatka made them concrete. It's human nature to dismiss warnings until the threat becomes undeniable." "Well, it's undeniable now," Phillips acknowledged. "And we have a lot of work to do to ensure it doesn't happen again." The following days unfolded in a blur of activity. Olivia worked with programming teams to develop algorithms that could identify the subtle patterns she had tracked manually. She consulted with satellite technicians to optimize coverage of regions where stealth testing might occur. She reviewed historical data, looking for previously missed anomalies that might indicate other covert programs. The work was demanding but deeply satisfying, her methodology finally taken seriously, her expertise recognized and utilized. The notebook that had once symbolized her supposed paranoia now served as the blueprint for a fundamental shift in strategic detection approaches. 10 days into the implementation process, Olivia was reviewing satellite data in her office when General Howard appeared in her doorway. His expression was grave enough to immediately capture her attention. "We've got another situation developing," he said without preamble. "The pattern recognition protocol you implemented has flagged anomalies in the Kashmir region. Low-level energy signatures that match some characteristics of what you tracked in Kamchatka." Olivia's focus immediately sharpened. "How long has the pattern been active?" "First detection was 8 days ago. The signatures are even fainter than what you tracked previously, right at the edge of what our modified systems can detect. But the timing intervals show consistency that triggered your correlation algorithms." He handed her a tablet displaying the detection data. Olivia studied it carefully, recognizing elements that paralleled her previous discovery while noting significant differences. The energy profile is similar but not identical. Different weapon system, same concealment strategy. "That's our assessment as well," Howard confirmed. "We're allocating satellite resources for visual confirmation, but given the mountainous terrain and heavy forest cover, direct observation may be limited." Olivia continued analyzing the pattern, her mind working through possible interpretations and implications. The interval progression suggests earlier development stage than what we saw in Kamchatka. If it follows the same acceleration curve, we'd be looking at weeks rather than days before operational readiness, which gives us time to address it through diplomatic channels before considering military options, Howard noted. "Your detection methodology may have just prevented another crisis from developing." The realization settled over Olivia with profound impact. The pattern recognition approach that had been dismissed as obsessive paranoia had now identified a second covert development program before it reached critical stages. The systems she had designed were working as intended, detecting threats, specifically engineered to evade standard monitoring protocols. "I'll need to refine the algorithms based on these new signatures," she said, already thinking through the technical adjustments. If they're using even lower energy profiles, we may need to adjust sensitivity parameters in the detection grid. Howard nodded. Make whatever modifications you need. You have full resource authorization. He paused, studying her with evident respect. You know, when they first transferred you here, there was significant skepticism among the senior staff. Your reputation preceded you, the analyst who saw threats in random noise, who couldn't distinguish between significant patterns and statistical anomalies. I'm familiar with the assessment, Olivia acknowledged, her tone neutral. That perception has been completely reversed. Your methodology has fundamentally changed how we approach early warning detection. The parallel systems you've implemented have already identified 2 covert programs that conventional monitoring would have missed entirely. The validation was professionally significant, but Olivia remained focused on the immediate challenge. The Kashmir anomalies will need continuous monitoring. If the pattern accelerates unexpectedly, we could be looking at a compressed timeline for response. Howard recognized her deflection of personal recognition, respecting her focus on the operational requirements rather than professional vindication. I'll assemble a dedicated team to track the development progression. Your pattern recognition expertise will be central to the assessment process. Over the next 3 weeks, Olivia led the monitoring of the Kashmir anomalies while continuing to refine the detection protocol she had developed. The satellite confirmation arrived piecemeal, the mountainous terrain and deliberate concealment making direct observation challenging. But the energy signatures maintained the pattern consistency she had identified, confirming another covert development program designed to operate beneath conventional detection thresholds. The diplomatic response was handled with careful precision, informed by the lessons of the Kamchatka incident. Rather than direct confrontation that revealed the full extent of detection capabilities, intermediaries delivered measured messages that made clear the program had been identified without specifying how. The approach preserved the effectiveness of the new monitoring systems while addressing the immediate security concern. By the time Olivia was called to brief the National Security Council, the Kashmir facility had been officially acknowledged and open to international inspection. A diplomatic resolution achieved without the crisis escalation that had marked the Kamchatka incident. The weapons system under development had been halted before reaching operational status, its stealth capabilities rendered irrelevant once detection had been confirmed. The briefing room in the West Wing projected power through understated elegance, wood paneling, subtle lighting, and the presidential seal prominently displayed. Olivia stood before government leaders who controlled the most powerful military and intelligence apparatus in history, explaining how her pattern recognition methodology had identified threats specifically designed to exploit gaps in traditional monitoring systems. The automated detection parameters served their intended purpose, she explained, displaying the filtering algorithms on the main screen. They eliminated the vast majority of low-level signatures to prevent false positives and information overload. But adversaries studied those parameters and designed testing protocols that operated just beneath them, creating a blind spot in our surveillance capabilities. The National Security Advisor leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. And your pattern recognition approach bridges this gap without generating overwhelming false positives? Yes, sir. By focusing on specific signature types and correlation patterns rather than individual anomalies, we can identify deliberate testing sequences while filtering out random fluctuations. The human analysis component remains essential to the system. Flags potential patterns, but experienced analysts make the final determination of significance. The Secretary of Defense studied the detection data with evident concern. How many other programs like Kamchatka and Kashmir might be operating beneath our conventional detection thresholds? That's difficult to quantify precisely, Olivia replied honestly. We're currently running historical data through the new pattern recognition algorithms to identify any previously missed anomalies. Initial results suggest at least 3 other regions with signature patterns that warrant further investigation. The briefing continued for nearly 2 hours, with Olivia addressing technical questions, implementation timelines, and resource requirements for full deployment of her detection methodology. Throughout the discussion, she maintained the same precise professionalism that had characterized her work from the beginning, focused on the security implications rather than personal vindication. When the briefing concluded, the National Security Advisor asked her to remain behind while the others filed out. Once they were alone, he fixed her with a penetrating look. "Major Mercer, your work has revealed a significant vulnerability in our strategic detection capabilities, one that could have had catastrophic consequences if exploited successfully." "Yes, sir. The stealth development programs were specifically designed to achieve operational status before conventional monitoring identified them. The strategic advantage of surprise deployment would have been considerable. And yet your reputation within the intelligence community, until very recently, was problematic. Your attention to anomalies was characterized as obsessive. Your pattern recognition described as seeing threats in random noise." His tone made clear this wasn't accusation, but observation. "Institutional systems optimize for efficiency and consensus," Olivia replied carefully. "My approach required resources to investigate anomalies that established parameters defined as insignificant. That created natural resistance. Until you were proven right in the most consequential way possible," the advisor noted. "Now your methodology is being implemented throughout the strategic command structure, and you're briefing the National Security Council on threats you identified that everyone else missed." Olivia hadn't considered her journey in those terms, from dismissed analyst to national security asset. She had simply followed the evidence, documented the patterns, and insisted on their significance even when institutional wisdom disagreed. "The President has authorized the establishment of a dedicated anomaly detection division within the intelligence community," the advisor continued. "Its mission will be to identify patterns and signatures that fall outside conventional parameters, but may represent emerging threats or strategic developments. He wants you to lead it." The assignment represented validation beyond anything Olivia could have anticipated, not just acceptance of her methodology, but institutionalization of her approach at the highest levels of national security infrastructure. The division would need significant latitude to investigate patterns that might ultimately prove insignificant, she pointed out, already thinking through the operational requirements. Most anomalies don't lead to verified threats. The false positive rate is inherently high in pattern recognition work, which is precisely why it requires leadership from someone who understands both the importance of following unusual patterns and the discipline to distinguish meaningful signals from statistical noise, the advisor replied. "Your work on Kamchatka and Kashmir demonstrated both qualities." As Olivia left the White House that evening, the weight of the new responsibility settled alongside the vindication of her approach. The analyst, once dismissed as paranoid for seeing patterns in the noise, had been tasked with building an entire division, dedicated to finding those patterns before they manifested as threats. The journey from isolation to influence had been neither planned nor expected. She had simply persisted in seeing what others missed, in documenting what automated systems ignored, in trusting that patterns held meaning even when institutional wisdom insisted otherwise. 3 months later, Olivia stood in the newly established headquarters of the Anomaly Detection Division, watching as carefully selected analysts were trained in her methodology. The facility combined cutting-edge technology with spaces designed specifically for human pattern recognition, an acknowledgement that machines and minds working together provided security capabilities that neither could achieve alone. Commander Phillips, who had transferred from Strategic Command to serve as her technical director, joined her at the observation window. "First training cohort is showing promising aptitude for pattern recognition," he reported. Your assessment. Protocols are identifying the analysts with natural ability to see correlations in complex data sets. The technical systems are important, Olivia noted, but ultimately this work depends on human intuition supported by technology, not replaced by it. We need analysts who trust their pattern recognition instincts, even when automated systems disagree. Like you did with Kamchatka, Phillips observed. Trusting what you saw despite institutional resistance. The patterns were there in the data, Olivia replied simply. They just required someone to look for them outside established parameters. The division she now led represented a fundamental shift in intelligence philosophy, an acknowledgement that some of the most significant threats emerge not from known categories, but from the spaces between them, from the signals deliberately designed to appear as noise, from the patterns that existed just beyond conventional detection thresholds. As she watched the analysts working through training scenarios based on her historical anomaly tracking, Olivia reflected on the journey that had brought her to this position. The isolation she had experienced throughout her career had been difficult, but ultimately necessary. It had allowed her to develop an approach unbound by institutional constraints, to see patterns that others were trained to ignore. The notebook that had once symbolized her supposed obsession now sat in a glass case. In the division's main hall, a reminder that sometimes the most important insights came from methodologies that challenged established wisdom. Its pages, filled with handwritten observations of anomalies and patterns, had become the foundation for a new approach to national security that integrated human intuition with technological capability. That evening, after the training session concluded, Olivia remained in her office reviewing detection data from monitoring stations around the globe. The systems she had designed were tracking subtle anomalies and potential patterns across dozens of regions, identifying signatures that conventional monitoring would have filtered out as background noise. Most would ultimately prove insignificant statistical variations or coincidental correlations rather than deliberate activities. But some might reveal emerging threats or strategic developments specifically designed to evade detection. The challenge was distinguishing between them, a task that required both technological sophistication and human judgment. A soft knock at her door interrupted her analysis. Lieutenant Sarah Chun, one of the most promising analysts in the training cohort, stood hesitantly in the doorway. Major Mercer? I was reviewing historical data from the South China Sea region and noticed something that might be significant. Come in, Lieutenant, Olivia invited, recognizing the uncertain confidence in the young analyst's demeanor, the look of someone who had seen a pattern but wasn't sure others would validate it. Chun placed her tablet on the desk, displaying a series of low-level energy signatures recorded over the previous 4 months. These readings were filtered out by standard monitoring protocols. Individually, they appear random and insignificant. But when tracked over time and analyzed for pattern consistency, they show deliberate timing intervals and signature characteristics. Olivia finished, immediately recognizing the methodology she had developed. You've identified a potential pattern that warranted escalation. Yes, ma'am. The signature profile doesn't match known testing protocols, but the consistency suggests deliberate activity rather than random fluctuations. I thought it reminded me of how you described the initial Kamchatka anomalies. Olivia studied the data carefully, noting both similarities and differences to the pattern she had tracked previously. This is excellent pattern recognition work, Lieutenant. The correlation parameters are subtle but statistically significant. The validation clearly meant a great deal to Chun, whose expression reflected the same mixture of certainty and doubt that Olivia had experienced throughout her career. Should I initiate formal anomaly tracking protocols? Absolutely. Establish continuous monitoring of the signature pattern and implement retrospective analysis to identify any additional occurrences in historical data. I'll authorize satellite resources for targeted observation of the region. As Chun left to implement the tracking protocols, Olivia felt a profound sense of completion. The cycle had turned. The analyst once dismissed for seeing patterns in the noise was now validating those same insights in others, creating an institutional framework where anomaly detection was valued rather than ridiculed. The division she had built would continue identifying threats that conventional systems missed, tracking patterns that emerged just beneath established detection thresholds. Most importantly, it would nurture analysts who understood that sometimes the most significant signals were the ones designed to appear insignificant, that vigilance required looking beyond established parameters to see what others had programmed themselves to ignore. As she returned to her review of global monitoring data, Olivia reflected that the journey from paranoia to validation had never really been about personal recognition. It had been about establishing a fundamental truth, that in a world of increasingly sophisticated threats, the capacity to see patterns in apparent randomness was an obsession. It was essential insight that might someday make the difference between peace and catastrophe. The analyst they had called paranoid had seen the truth. The patterns they had dismissed as meaningless had revealed deliberate deception, and the vigilance they had characterized as obsession had potentially prevented strategic surprises that could have altered the course of international relations. In the end, the distinction between paranoia and prescience had proven to be simply a matter of whether the patterns were real. For Olivia Mercer, they always had been waiting to be discovered by someone persistent enough to look for them, disciplined enough to document them, and confident enough to insist on their significance, even when everyone else saw only noise. 5 years had transformed the Anomaly Detection Division from experimental initiative to essential component of national security infrastructure. What began as Olivia's solitary methodology had evolved into a sophisticated operation with specialized teams, advanced technology, and global monitoring capabilities. The division occupied a dedicated facility outside Washington, its architecture reflecting its mission designed to see connections others missed, to find patterns in apparent randomness. Olivia, now Colonel Mercer, walked through the main analysis floor where dozens of specialists worked at stations, configured for her unique approach to pattern recognition. The atmosphere hummed with focused energy, analysts tracking subtle anomalies and potential correlations across diverse data streams. Screens displayed everything from energy signatures to communication patterns, maritime movements to atmospheric fluctuations, all examined for deviations that might indicate deliberate activity beneath conventional detection thresholds. The Kashmir methodology picked up something interesting in the Arctic Circle. Commander Chun reported, falling into step beside her. Chun had risen from promising trainee to operations director, her natural aptitude for pattern recognition making her invaluable to the division's mission. Intermittent energy signatures appearing at precise intervals over the past 14 days. Too faint for standard monitoring to flag, but showing consistency that suggests deliberate testing. Olivia followed Chun to a specialized workstation, where the data was displayed across multiple screens. The signatures were indeed subtle brief energy spikes that would typically be filtered out as background noise by conventional systems. But when compiled and analyzed as a sequence, they revealed distinct patterns consistent with controlled testing rather than random phenomena. The profile doesn't match anything in our threat database, Chun continued, highlighting specific characteristics in the pattern. But the timing precision, energy consistency indicate technological origin rather than natural occurrence. Olivia studied the data carefully, noting both familiar elements and novel components. The signature modulation suggests advanced shielding technology possibly designed to operate beneath even our enhanced detection thresholds. She pointed to specific fluctuations in the pattern. These microbursts appear calibrated to avoid triggering our correlation algorithms, which means whoever is behind this understands not just conventional monitoring parameters, but our specialized detection methodology. Chun concluded, the implication clear and concerning. Over the past 5 years, the division had identified and neutralized 7 covert weapons programs, specifically designed to evade international monitoring. Each discovery had led to diplomatic intervention before operational deployment, preventing potential strategic surprises without escalating to military confrontation. But each success had also provided adversaries with insights into detection capabilities, creating an evolving competition between concealment and discovery. Implement continuous monitoring of the region, Olivia directed. Establish pattern projection based on current progression and allocate satellite resources for targeted observation during the next projected testing window. And prepare a preliminary assessment for strategic command. This may represent a significant evolution in stealth technology. As Chun moved to implement the directives, Olivia continued through the facility toward the research section where theoretical analysts work to anticipate future evasion strategies. The division's approach had evolved from reactive to proactive, not just identifying existing patterns, but predicting how adversaries might modify their activities to avoid detection. Dr. Marcus Reed, the division's chief theoretical analyst, looked up from his workstation as she approached. His background in quantum physics and complex systems analysis brought unique perspective to pattern recognition challenges. Colonel, I was just about to call you. We've completed the simulation. Runs on potential quantum signature masking, and Olivia prompted, already anticipating concerning results based on his expression. It's theoretically feasible, Reed confirmed, displaying the simulation data on his screen. Quantum fluctuation patterns could be engineered to appear as random background noise while actually carrying encoded testing sequences. Our current detection methodology would struggle to distinguish them from natural quantum variations. The implication was significant, a potential next-generation approach to evading the very detection systems Olivia had designed to catch stealth development programs. How far away is practical implementation of this technology? Based on known research trajectories, 3 to 5 years, Reed estimated. Though if someone has made breakthrough advances in quantum stabilization, it could be sooner. We need to start developing countermeasures now, Olivia decided, already mentally allocating resources to the challenge. Establish a dedicated team to design quantum-sensitive detection protocols. Pull specialists from both the theoretical and applied divisions. The continuous evolution of threat and response had defined Olivia's work for the past 5 years. Each detection breakthrough was eventually met with more sophisticated concealment strategies, requiring constant adaptation and innovation to maintain effective monitoring capabilities. The pattern recognition approach that had once been her solitary methodology had developed into an entire field of specialized analysis, with techniques and technologies specifically designed to identify deliberately concealed activities. As she left the research section, Olivia's secure communication device signaled an incoming priority message. General Howard, now Joint Chiefs Chairman, requested her immediate presence at the Pentagon for an emergency briefing. The message contained no detailed standard protocol for sensitive matters, but the priority code indicated significance beyond routine consultation. Within the hour, Olivia sat in a secure briefing room deep within the Pentagon, joined by senior representatives from military intelligence, strategic command, and the National Security Council. The atmosphere carried the controlled tension she had come to recognize as preceding major security developments. General Howard entered and moved directly to the podium, dispensing with usual formalities. Thank you all for responding so quickly. We're dealing with a situation that requires immediate attention and absolute operational security. He activated the room's display system, bringing up satellite imagery of an isolated region in northern Siberia. 12 hours ago, one of Colonel Mercer's anomaly detection teams identified unusual energy signatures emanating from this location. The pattern characteristics suggested advanced testing protocols, specifically designed to evade conventional monitoring systems. The screen shifted to enhanced imagery, showing what appeared to be a research facility partially concealed by both natural terrain and artificial camouflage. Unlike previous covert installations, this one made no attempt to appear completely invisible. It maintained a cover story as a climate research station while concealing its actual capabilities beneath that legitimate facade. Initial assessment suggested weapons development, Howard continued. But deeper analysis of the energy signatures revealed something potentially more concerning. He nodded to a technical specialist who brought up detailed scans of the facilities, power systems, and operational patterns. What we're looking at appears to be the testing phase of a quantum communications array, designed for instantaneous coordination of multiple weapons systems across vast distances without any detectable electromagnetic transmission that could be intercepted or jammed. The strategic implications were immediately apparent to everyone in the room. Such technology would fundamentally alter military response capabilities, allowing coordinated strikes with no warning signature and no ability to disrupt command and control communications. More concerning, Howard continued, intelligence indicates the system is approaching operational status. Final integration testing appears scheduled within the next 72 hours, after which the technology could be deployed to active weapons platforms. The silence in the room reflected the gravity of the situation. A technological breakthrough of this magnitude, deployed without warning or counterbalance, could destabilize the entire international security framework, creating capabilities that existing defense systems were not designed to address. Diplomatic channels have been activated, the National Security Advisor noted. But given the advanced stage of development and strategic advantage this technology represents, we don't anticipate voluntary disclosure or suspension of the program. Howard turned to Olivia. Colonel Mercer, your division identified this development through pattern recognition when no other monitoring system detected anything unusual. We need your assessment of the situation and recommendations for response. Options. Olivia studied the data carefully, analyzing both the technical characteristics and strategic implications. The energy signatures show sophisticated masking techniques, specifically designed to defeat standard detection parameters. But they also reveal vulnerabilities in the quantum stabilization process that could be exploited to disrupt the systems. Functionality. She highlighted specific elements in the power fluctuation patterns. These signature variations indicate calibration challenges they haven't fully resolved. The quantum entanglement process requires precise energy management. That creates detectable patterns despite their efforts at concealment. Are you suggesting a technical countermeasure rather than conventional military response? The Strategic Command representative asked, clearly intrigued by the possibility. Precisely, Olivia confirmed. A targeted electromagnetic pulse, specifically calibrated to the quantum frequency range they're utilizing, could disrupt the entanglement process and render the system non-functional without physical destruction of the facility. A non-kinetic option would minimize escalation risks, the National Security Advisor observed. But delivery of a targeted EMP would require close proximity to the facility well within their territorial airspace. Not necessarily, Olivia countered. Based on the energy signatures we've detected, I believe we can calculate the precise frequency vulnerabilities in their quantum stabilization system. A properly calibrated pulse could be delivered from outside territorial boundaries if focused correctly. The technical specialists in the room exchanged glances, evaluating the feasibility of her proposal. The physics support Colonel Mercer's assessment, the Chief Science Advisor finally confirmed. If we can precisely identify the quantum frequency range they're utilizing, a directed energy weapon could theoretically disrupt the entanglement process without physical proximity. The discussion shifted to technical requirements, delivery mechanisms, and timing considerations. Olivia worked with the science team to analyze the energy signatures in greater detail, identifying specific vulnerabilities in the quantum stabilization process that could be targeted without conventional military strikes. 3 hours later, a response plan had been formulated that would neutralize the quantum communications array without physical destruction or territorial incursion. The approach relied entirely on the pattern recognition insights Olivia's team had developed, the ability to see not just the concealed testing activity, but the specific technical characteristics that revealed exploitable vulnerabilities. As the briefing concluded, General Howard held Olivia back while the others filed out. "Your pattern recognition methodology just provided us with a non-kinetic option in a situation that could easily have escalated toward direct military confrontation," he observed. "This is exactly why your division has become essential to national security strategy." "The patterns were there in the data," Olivia replied with characteristic focus on the analytical rather than personal validation. "They just required the right framework to become visible." "A framework you created when everyone else was looking in different directions," Howard reminded her. "Don't downplay the significance of what you've built, Colonel. The Anomaly Detection Division has fundamentally changed how we identify and address emerging threats, especially those specifically designed to evade conventional monitoring." The operation proceeded exactly 48 hours later. A specialized aircraft carrying the directed energy weapon Olivia had helped design positioned itself in international airspace, while outside territorial boundaries but within effective range of the quantum facility. Based on the precise frequency vulnerabilities her team had identified, the weapon delivered a calibrated electromagnetic pulse targeting the specific quantum range being utilized for entanglement testing. Sap-like confirmation arrived within minutes. The facility's power systems showed immediate disruption patterns consistent with quantum stabilization failure. The pulse had successfully interrupted the entanglement process without physical damage to the installation, rendering the communications array non-functional at a critical development phase. The diplomatic messages delivered immediately afterward made clear that the technological vulnerability had been identified and could be targeted again if development continued. The demonstration of capability without territorial violation or conventional attack provided perfect diplomatic leverage, revealing advanced technical understanding while minimizing escalation risks. Within 72 hours, international inspectors had been granted access to the facility under a negotiated transparency agreement. The quantum communications program was placed under multinational oversight, preventing unilateral deployment while allowing controlled research to continue under international supervision. A potential strategic surprise that could have destabilized global security frameworks had been identified, neutralized, and ultimately regulated through diplomatic channels, all because anomaly detection had revealed patterns that conventional monitoring systems had missed entirely. 1 month later, Olivia stood before the Joint Chiefs of Staff in the Pentagon Secure Briefing Center, presenting the division's comprehensive analysis of the quantum communications incident and recommendations for enhanced detection capabilities. "The quantum masking techniques we encountered represent a significant evolution in concealment strategy," she explained, displaying the sophisticated pattern analysis her team had conducted. "They were specifically designed to defeat not just conventional monitoring parameters, but our first-generation anomaly detection algorithms as well." The imagery showed how the facility had engineered its testing procedures to produce energy signatures that appeared as random background noise while actually conducting precise quantum entanglement experiments. Without the advanced pattern recognition methodology Olivia's division had developed, the activity would have remained completely undetected until operational deployment. "What's particularly concerning is the sophistication of their understanding of our detection capabilities," she continued. "The concealment techniques showed specific adaptations designed to exploit filtering algorithms in both conventional and anomaly detection systems. They're studying our monitoring methods and adapting accordingly, the Army chief noted. Exactly, Olivia confirmed. Which means we need to accelerate the development of next-generation detection protocols that anticipate rather than merely respond to concealment innovations. The briefing continued with detailed technical recommendations and resource requirements for enhanced monitoring capabilities. Throughout the presentation, Olivia maintained the same precise professionalism that had characterized her work from the beginning, focused on analytical insights rather than personal validation, despite the success her methodology had achieved. When the formal briefing concluded, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs remained behind while the others departed. The President has authorized the establishment of a new strategic initiative, he informed her. The Preemptive Detection Directorate tasked with developing and implementing monitoring technologies specifically designed to identify threats before they reach operational status. The scope of the assignment extended far beyond Olivia's current division, encompassing advanced research, international coordination, and strategic response capabilities united under a single operational framework. It represented the institutionalization of her approach at the highest levels of national security infrastructure. The Directorate will require leadership with unique qualifications, the chairman continued. Technical expertise in pattern recognition, operational experience in threat assessment, and proven strategic insight. Your promotion to Brigadier General has been approved, effective immediately. The President wants you to build this organization from the ground up. The assignment represented not just professional advancement, but the complete transformation of how national security approached emerging threats, from reactive monitoring within established parameters to proactive detection of deliberate concealment. Strategies. The approach Olivia had pioneered in isolation had evolved into the foundation for a fundamental shift in security doctrine. As she left the Pentagon that evening, the weight of the new responsibility settled alongside the vindication of her methodology. The analyst once dismissed as paranoid for seeing patterns in noise had been tasked with building an entire directorate dedicated to identifying what others missed, to seeing the connections, correlations, and deliberate deceptions that conventional systems were designed to overlook. 6 months later, Olivia stood in the partially completed headquarters of the Preemptive Detection Directorate, watching specialized teams being assembled from across the intelligence and defense communities. The facility incorporated advanced technology specifically designed for her pattern recognition approach, with architectural elements that facilitated both human intuition and machine learning working in concert. Commander Chun, now appointed as her deputy director, joined her at the observation window overlooking the main analysis floor. First operational teams are online and implementing the quantum-sensitive detection protocols. Regional monitoring. Stations are being retrofitted with the new pattern recognition systems. And the theoretical division? Olivia asked, focusing on the forward-looking research that would anticipate rather than merely respond to evolving concealment strategies. Fully staffed with specialists from physics, information theory, and complex systems analysis, Chun confirmed. They're already modeling potential next-generation masking techniques and developing countermeasures before we encounter them in the field. The Directorate represented the culmination of a journey that had begun with a single analyst tracking anomalies that others dismissed, a solitary methodology that had evolved into a comprehensive approach to national security. The patterns Olivia had seen when others saw only noise had revealed threats specifically designed to exploit gaps in conventional monitoring systems. We've come a long way from manual tracking in notebooks, Chun observed with a smile, acknowledging their shared history from those early days of anomaly detection. The fundamental principle remains the same, Olivia replied, looking beyond established parameters to see what might be deliberately hidden there. The technology has evolved, but the essential insight hasn't changed. Sometimes the most significant signals are the ones designed to appear insignificant. As they moved through the facility, reviewing specialized teams and advanced technologies, Olivia reflected on the transformation that had occurred not just in security infrastructure, but in fundamental perception. The approach once dismissed as paranoid obsession had proven to be essential vigilance in a world where the most dangerous threats were the ones specifically designed to evade detection. Later that evening, alone in her office reviewing global monitoring data, Olivia opened a drawer in her desk and removed the notebook that had started it all, the handwritten record of anomalies and patterns she had tracked when automated systems filtered them out as meaningless noise. Its pages, filled with precise notations and calculations, had become the foundation for an entire directorate dedicated to seeing what others missed. The journey from isolated analyst to directorate leader had never been about personal vindication or professional advancement. It had been about establishing a fundamental truth that in a world of increasingly sophisticated threats, the capacity to see patterns in apparent randomness wasn't paranoia, it was prescience that might someday make the difference between security and catastrophe. Lieutenant Johnson, a promising young analyst from the quantum detection team, appeared in her doorway with the hesitant confidence Olivia recognized from her own early career. The look of someone who had seen a pattern but wasn't certain others would validate it. "General Mercer? I've been reviewing energy signatures from the Pacific Rim monitoring grid and noticed something that might be significant." "Come in, Lieutenant," Olivia invited, setting aside the historical notebook to focus on the present challenge. Johnson displayed a series of data points that individually appeared random and insignificant. These readings fall below reporting thresholds for both conventional systems and our standard anomaly detection algorithms. But when analyzed as a sequential pattern over the past 36 days, they show consistency that suggests deliberate activity rather than random fluctuation. Olivia finished, immediately recognizing the methodology she had developed and taught. "You've identified a pattern that warranted escalation." "Yes, ma'am." Johnson highlighted specific characteristics in the data. "The signature profile doesn't match known testing protocols in our database, but the timing intervals and energy modulation suggest technological origin rather than natural phenomena." Olivia studied the pattern carefully, noting both familiar elements and novel components. "This is excellent analytical work, Lieutenant. The correlation parameters are subtle but statistically significant." She pointed to specific variations in the signature. "These modulation characteristics are particularly interesting. They suggest adaptive concealment designed to evolve in response to detection efforts." The validation clearly meant a great deal to Johnson, whose expression reflected the mixture of certainty and doubt that Olivia had experienced throughout her own career. "Should I initiate formal tracking protocols?" "Absolutely. Establish continuous monitoring of the signature pattern and implement retrospective analysis to identify any additional occurrences in historical data. I'll authorize resources for targeted observation during the next projected interval." As Johnson left to implement the directives, Olivia felt the profound continuity of the work she had pioneered. The cycle continued, new analysts identifying subtle patterns that might reveal deliberate concealment, applying methodologies that had evolved from her original insights, maintaining vigilance against threats specifically designed to appear insignificant. The directorate she had built would continue identifying what conventional systems missed, tracking patterns that emerged just beneath established detection thresholds, anticipating how adversaries might adapt their concealment strategies to evade monitoring. Most importantly, it would nurture analysts who understood that sometimes the most significant signals were the ones designed to appear as noise. That vigilance required looking beyond established parameters to see what others had programmed themselves to ignore. The command center they had once mockingly called her paranoid had become a general leading national security innovation. The conspiracy theories they had dismissed had prevented nuclear war and transformed strategic doctrine. And the quiet persistence they had characterized as obsession had created an entire framework for identifying threats before they materialized, potentially saving countless lives through detection rather than confrontation. In the end, the distinction between paranoia and prescience had proven to be simply a matter of whether the patterns were real. For Olivia Mercer, they always had been waiting to be discovered by someone persistent enough to look for them, disciplined enough to document them, and confident enough to insist on their significance, even when everyone else saw only noise. As she returned to reviewing the global monitoring data, Olivia carried the certainty that somewhere in the apparent randomness, important patterns were waiting to be recognized, signals deliberately designed to be missed by conventional systems, but potentially visible to those who knew how to look beyond established parameters. The work continued, the vigilance undiminished, the fundamental insight unchanged. Sometimes the most dangerous threats were the ones hidden in plain sight, visible only to those willing to see patterns where others saw nothing but meaningless noise. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.